Okay. Okay, here we go. Dr. Henry Gemara. We're up to the new Mishnah. We're coming into the grand finale of of the parak. Just set my screen up a little bit so I can see better. Okay. Dr. Henry Gemara. Hamatayr Yenoi Shal Ovid Kachavim. And we learned yesterday that what this means is, so Rashi, Sha'asai B'Kashrus, a guy owned the wine, but he hired the COR to make the wine completely kosher. L'moicher Yisrael, and the intent was that all the wine would be sold to Israel. That's why I wanted to keep the wine kosher. The Yid does not pay the guy now until it gets sold. So the wine is made in the reshus of the guy by a Yid, and as the Yid sells it and receives revenue, he pays the guy. And where does he store it? The nice neighbor and he stores it in the reshus of the guy. So the halacha is hapasuach l'shus harabim be'ir sheyesh ba ovid kechavim v'Yisraelim. If it's a home of the guy that's open to reshus harabim, meaning somebody walking by can see it, and it's a city where Eden and Goyim live in, mutter, it will be mutter, and we're not concerned that the guy would have tampered with it. Look, Rashi, mutter. The mirzas le'ovid kechavim. Do you know why the guy won't tamper with it? Because he's afraid he'll lose his extra. He won't touch the wine. The Amar, he'll say, Dil Muchazi li Hanich Yisrael, the Avri B'Shus Harabim. Someone walking by the B'Shus Harabim might see me, Umafsidna, and I'll lose my money because no one's going to buy this wine. Bafilu, this is a big chiddush that Rashi is saying now, which the long Tosfos vehemently argues with. But Vafilu ein maftech v'chosim, even if the Jew is not holding on to the key, meaning the goy has access to the product being stored, nevertheless, shori, it will still be mutter, because we're sure that the goy wouldn't dare go in and touch the wine. She'ein lo klum al oisa yayin. V'hu she'ein lo klum al oisa yayin. Rashi sticks in another caveat that is required, and Tosfos argues on this as well. This only works if the Yid doesn't owe a penny on the wine. Like the Mishnah will say on the second case, if the Mishnah only introduced that in the second case, it does not apply to the first case. That's one of the many kashas that Tosfos has on Chitas Rashi. So again, Rashi says, if the wine belongs, even if the wine belongs to the guy and it's stored by the guy, and the guy has a key, if you have merely two things, A, is that you don't live in the city and it can be seen from the Rishus Rabbim, A. Condition number two is the Yid doesn't owe any money on the wine. So even though he didn't pay, but when the guy writes that receipt that you paid already, it absolves the Yid of any payment. So it's like it belongs to the Yid. So those are the two things that you need, because then the guy will be uncomfortable to be caught having damaged the wine. But if the guy never wrote that I was fully paid, so then the guy won't want to touch it. Then the guy will be much more easy to touch it, because if he's caught, he'll just say, "This is my wine." But if it's fully paid, he already gave a receipt that it's fully paid. Then he'll be uncomfortable getting caught, and that's why you could trust that the guy didn't touch it. So that's the first half of the mission. Zok to Gemara weiter. What if there's only goyim in the city, meaning the guy doesn't have to be concerned that a Jew will catch him? So then it's a different story. Then Zok the Mishnah, it's Ache Yesha Ibn Mishamer. Rashi says the Bach fixes these. The Nusach is Ache Yosef Shemer. You have to appoint a mashgiach. If there's a mashgiach there, then you don't need to be concerned. The mashgiach doesn't have to be a mashgiach tamidi. It could be a yoytze v'nichnas because the guy's mirsus, he doesn't know at any time if a yid could pop in and catch him doing anything. Rab Shimon ben Elazar Omer, Rishus Oivdei Gechavim Achasi. The Rishus of the guy is all one. That's a cryptic line. It's a little difficult to understand what it means. The Gemara is going to elaborate on what Rab Shimon ben Elazar meant. Now the next half of the Mishnah. Hamatar Yenoi Shal Oivdei Gechavim. The nice neighbor Shusai. Again, your matar the ayin of Oivdei, meaning it's made the kashrus. The nice neighbor Shusai. And it's placed in the rishus of the guy. And the guy writes for the yid, his kabalti mimachamois, I received money from you. Mutter will be mutter. Now Tosfos doesn't like Rashi's pshat earlier because it's Rashi's learning that this second half of the Mishnah is shedding light, is explaining the first half of the Mishnah. Tosfos says it's two different cases. So Tosfos doesn't like this pshat of Rashi. But I'll call upon him. It says mutter. Aval im yitzi Yisrael lahaiti ve'inamanichai achitin le'smaisov. But if the guy says no, you're not taking this wine until you pay in full, so it's more nice than the guy's one. Then zehayamaisa beveishan va'asru. That they asru because the guy is not going to be afraid to touch this wine, as Rashi says. Aval im roitza shayayin nasalei mashkin. As we looked yesterday, this specific wine is a mashkin to the guy. The guy will not let go of this wine until he's paid for it. So it's like he has a loan that's due, that the wine he can collect from, Osir, that will be Osir, the loy mirsus. In such a case, the guy is not afraid. The sabar, the guy will think, Ichazi loy mafsidna, I'm not going to lose anything. I will say this is my wine. So therefore he might touch it. Again, Rashi learned the second half of the Mishnah. It's explained the first half of the Mishnah, which means in the case of the Sefer, the noise of Rishusai, that's even in the Rishus of a goy, and it's even if the goy does not, even if the goy is holding on to the keys. That's how Rashi learns. That the first half of the Mishnah, Hamatar Yenoi, is the same thing as the second half of the Mishnah, and it's speaking where the goy is holding on to the keys. Tosfos learns differently because of these kashas and many other kashas, is that in the first half of the Mishnah, the goy did not have the keys. The yid had the keys. And it was not a case of his kabaltim chamois. But if the Jew holds on to the keys, that itself would be more of a shmira. But Rashi learns the goy did not have the keys. But Rashi learns the goy did have the keys, and it has to be a case of his kabalti. Zok the Heilige Mishnah. The Mishnah says that if it's a city that's full of goyim, then you need a mashgiach, and it's not enough to be sonich on the mirsus. Break the Gemara. There's Jewish peddlers, even if not a single Jew lives in the city. There's always Jewish peddlers that could chap a look, as Rashi says. And they're over me earlier. Umir says, the guy is afraid. They are draining sich on the streets, and they'll see it. So even if it's a ear shakula over the there would still be a mirsus. Now Tosfos has a kasha on Rashi's pshat. I don't understand. I'm in my private home. I'm worried that a Jewish peddler, the Jewish peddler doesn't even know what he's looking at. He doesn't know whose it is, what it is. Why would you be concerned about a Jewish peddler? That's one of the kashas that Tosfos asks. We look down to Tosfos. Tosfos says, Avol roichlim lefi shah ma yedu. Correct, Tosfos, I don't understand. Why are we concerned about a roichlim? If there's Yidden living in there, one Yid will pass the word around. By the way, I have wine by this guy. Keep an eye out for him. So I understand if it's a city where there's Yidden there, so there's a shmir, the guy won't touch it. How are they even going to know that this is wine that they have to watch for. So that's why Tosfos learns that this is speaking where the guy does where the guy does where the guy does not have the keys, and therefore the guy to get in would involve a lot more work for him to get in there, and that's why Reichlin might help. But a couple of Rashi learns that the guy has the keys and Reichlin could help. Amar Shmuel be'ir sheyesh lo dlasayim uvriach. We're talking about a city that's very fortified, and no strangers can get in there. Think of a gated community where you're not going to find peddlers running around. The Rishonim ask, the reason why there were Jewish peddlers is because Chazal wanted women to be pleasant for their husbands. And therefore, we want peddlers to sell them perfumes and makeup. So why would they be going around in a Goyish city? So the answer, yeah, that's the reason why they set up that business. But once they're in the business, of course, they're going to try to sell to Goyim as well and make money off Goyim as well. Zok the head of Gemara weiter. Omer of Yosef, v'chaloin kereshus harabim tami. If there's a window, it's like it's a reshus harabim. What does it mean, chaloin? So Rashi has two pshat. Chaloin kereshus harabim tami. Afilu bayis besuach lechotzer. Even if the house of the goy is open to a chotzer, v'chaloin pasuach lechotzer reshus harabim keneged pesach habayis, and there's a window in the wall between the chotzer and the reshus harabim, where someone walking by the reshus harabim could look through that window and then see the house and see what's going on with those barrels, that would be enough that the goy will not be tampering with it. Loshen achar, it means chaloin shel Yisrael pasuach keneged pesach habayis. If there's a Jewish house in that chutzner and his window faces the door of the house where they're keeping the wine, that's just like a shusarabim dami v'cheinikar. So whatever it means there's a possibility for the goy to be caught. The goy knows that a yid could be watching him, and therefore he's not going to go tamper with this wine because he doesn't want to lose the money, the value of the wine, of the kosher wine. The ashba k'shusarabim dami. An ashba is also like a Rosh Hashanah. An ashba is a place where people aren't hanging out there very often. Once in a while, someone goes to the bathroom. And vidikla Rosh Hashanah. If there's a tree, a palm tree there, it's like Rosh Hashanah because at any time the Yid might climb up that tree to get dates, to get fruit from that tree, and he might see what the guy is doing. But psik reshe, what if the head of the decal is cut down? In other words, there are no more payers. So is that considered something that the goy would be concerned about? Because now the yid for sure has no reason ever to be at that observation point. What's the machlokes? What's the svar? Man da asar, why would he be climbing up his tree? It's no longer something that the guy would be afraid of. There's no payers to collect. Roman da shari, zimna da avnalei behema. What if the Yid loses a behema and he wants to go to a high point so that he can look around and see a vast area to see where his behema went to? The Salach Yune Basra, he might climb up the decal for that purpose, and then he'll see the goy tampering with the wine. So again, Tosfos doesn't like Rashi over here because if you look at the third intermediate line of Tosfos, Tosfos asks, ashba bedikla lepesach pasuach. We're comparing, the Gemara asks that an ashba or a decal should be like pesach pasuach. V'chima svara hizu. What type of svara is it? Shianiach ha'ovet kachavim liga b'yayin shu etzloi b'loi mafteach v'chosim. What svara is it that the goy would stop touching wine that's by him, and he has the key. Miyiras mikra sheyeshev Yisrael hadabayir, on the slight unlikely chance that punkt at that moment a Yisrael who lives in that city will be ala ashba, will be going to the bathroom in the ashba, or yala al dekel at that exact moment. What's the likelihood? So that's why Tosfos doesn't like Rashi's pshat, and he learns that it's speaking where the goy has the keys. And if the goy has where the goy does not have the keys, I'm sorry, speaking where the goy does not have the keys, and it takes a lot more for the goy to break in to this warehouse, that's where he's scared. So if we just look down a couple of lines, Tosfos says, where the Yid's holding on to the lock. The door is locked. So it's much more noticeable trying to get into a locked door. The Chaim Pirush Rashi, Pirushim Rishonim, Uvaloi Kosav Lo Yav Skabalti. Sai didn't write Skabalti, and Sai has the key, and therefore that's where there'd be a problem because if there's a lock on the door, it's much harder for the guy to get in. That would be noticed by somebody who might not normally be suspicious. Sagt die Gemara weiter. Tanu Rabbanan. Echad haloikeach. Oh, I just want to point out, now this machlekes Rashi Tosfos makes a big nafkamina lahalacha. And again, in those days, wine was a big deal and how it was stored. So again, Tosfos holds that our Mishnah is saying that even if the door is under lock and key, but in a place where there's no yidden, it's going to be a problem. So because the Mishnah says if it's a ir shapula inochem, it's a problem, and it's speaking that there's a lock and key. According to Rashi, the Mishnah is not speaking where it's under lock and key, and in that case, it's also Mishusarabim. But if there's a lock, Mishus Goyim. But if it has a lock and key, from Rashi it's mashma that even if it's a ir shapula inochem, but it's under lock and key, then you could be soymich on it. But Tosfos learns that our Mishnah is speaking when it's under lock and key, and still in a city that's all goyim, it would be a concern. So based on that, so Tosfos, a big chumor, comes out from what I'm saying. And if you look at Tosfos, lesser what if a goy is a wholesaler of kosher wine? So he'll buy kosher wine from a Jewish supplier, and the Jew will seal and double seal the wine to make sure that it's not tampered with. So even when the goy transports it under the goy's complete control, it's safe from tampering because it has a tamper-proof seal. Even I'm sorry, I'm going to Goyim buy wine where it's less expensive, and they sell it at a great profit in another place where it's more expensive. So there's there were multiple safeties, double seals, double walls, double floors. They did an abundance of chaysim. It's going to be a problem. The Tanan, we learned in our Mishnah based on Tosfos' understanding. Even those under lock and key. So Tosfos, the way I'm learning, even if something's under lock and key, which a guy transporting wine from city to city, clearly that's like an ear of only goyim, because it's a goy by himself that's transporting it. That will be a problem. And that was, I guess, a big issue because maybe there were goyish distributors in those days, and that makes a big problem. So Tosfos at the end said maybe we could be soymich over here to be machalik. And Tosfos says, Va'acha kain motza tam lahatir. Then I found a how I could be makel. The dafka mitar yene shel oived kechovim shelokcha oived kechovim bekarmoi v'lo tarachoi. There, if it's the guy's kerem, and the guy didn't work so hard to get it, and the yid just prepared it for him, the yovei bekal zayif, that will be easy for a guy to forge and to get in there and make it look like he didn't, and usher the wine. But hacha, here you have a wine merchant that's buying the wine from a Jew who's paying a hefty price for it. Kivin shetereach kol kach shelakech oisem Yisrael. The guy machtimo choisem b'soichoisem. Here the guy, his full investment is here. The nois noidly stacker boy, and he's carrying it only because he wants to sell it and make money. There, ein lira sheyitrach v'yizayif. There, we're not concerned that it'll break open the lock and it'll create a fake seal to make it look like it was not tampered with. Pen yafsatir. He's going to lose too much. Well, smach heter zeh shasa yayin shehuva mi al tziraya. I'm not sure where that city was, but it was a city, I guess, where wine was produced, kosher wine was produced. Was an Indian, and therefore Avoda Tam was matir. And Tosfos spoke a lot about the rules of wine that's being sent transported by a goy and what its heter is. So Tosfos seems to say, according to my pshat, where even though it's under lock and key, if it's irsha kula nachem, it's going to be a problem. So Tosfos says the transporters in those days had more to lose, and there were more precautions. Talk to the Bryce weiter. Echod halakeach, ve'echod asoicher bayis bechatzera shel ovid gechavim, umileu yayin. So now we have Jewish-owned wine, but he's rented storage space from a guy. The Yisrael dor ba'isachotzer, and a Yisrael lives in that chotzer, so there's supervision there, or at least there's the fear that the guy will have to tamper with it. Mutter the afapi she'ein maftech v'chosim biyadai. If the wine belongs to the Jew, so we're not talking about a matahar yena shalak. We're talking about wine that belongs to a Jew, and he's just warehousing it in a goyish warehouse. But a Yisrael is dar ba'isachotzer, then it's going to be mutter, even if there's no lock and key. We're not concerned that the goy will touch it. Gewalt. Let's turn over to Omid Beis. I'm sorry, I'm pushing the wrong buttons over here. Okay, now we're good. Sagt die Gemara weiter. What if there's not a Yid living in that culture? So he's warehousing wine by a guy, and there's no Jew in that culture. It would still be mutter. That's only if it's under lock and key. So therefore, the guy can't get to it. But hamatar yene shel ovid kechavim, which is similar to the case of our Mishnah, where now the wine belongs to the guy and the Yid produced it, be kedushin with the hira. So then, b'rshusai, if it's in the reshus of the guy, but the Yisrael dor ba'isachotzer, but a Yid lives in that chotzer, mutter, but v'hu shemaftech v'choyse biyadai. So the difference between if it's the Jew's wine or the guy's wine is if it has to be under a key on the lock. If it's the Yid's wine and there's a Yid in that chotzer, then it does not have to be under lock and key. We're not worried the guy will tamper it. But if it's matar yenish lev kechavim, there you need to have a lock and key. Zok Rashi, yenish lev kechavim b'shusai, im hayayin shalovet kechavim. If the wine belongs to the guy, the tiara Yisrael, the nosnei b'shus ovet kechavim atzmai, and now it's in the guy's reshus. The guy's kosher wine is in the guy's reshus. The Yisrael dar b'oisach chotzer, and Yisrael lives in that chotzer. Mutter, the wine will be mutter. But there you need an extra protection. That's only if it's under lock and key. But if it's not under lock and key, it will be usher. Since this wine belongs to the guy, he's not going to be afraid to tamper with it. Rabbi Yochanan told him, we need to change this a little bit. And Tani as follows: If a Yid lives in that chotzer, it's going to be no problem, and even if he doesn't have the key. So if the Yid lives in the chotzer, the Bryce we just quoted says you still need maftech b'chosim b'yodai. If the wine belongs to a goy, so no. If there's Yisrael dor imay b'chotzer, then even if there's no maftech v'chosim b'yadei el b'muter. But if a Yid lives b'chotzer acheres, then aser afal pi shemaftech v'chosim b'yadei. Then it's aser even if the Yid has the key. So Rabbi Yochanan makes it a much wider rift between Yisrael dor b'chatzera and not. Yisrael dor b'chatzera, he's makel and says you don't even need maftech v'chosim b'yadei. But if there's no Yisrael dor b'chatzera, no lock and key will help. It'll be aser no matter what. That's how Rabbi Yochanan understood it. Divrei Meir, according to Rabbi Meir, the Chachamim Oishim and the Chachamim are even more machmer, and we'll see what they hold in a minute. Hey Shemer Yoshev Mushamer, unless there's a Mashgiach committee there. Oy Achiyavay Mumuna Habalakit, or at least there's someone who comes at regular intervals. Now, the Gemara is going to ask, the worst type of mashgiach is someone who comes at regular intervals, because the guy knows when he's coming. It's only a guy is good. He's a mashgiach's good. Or Yotze could pop in at any moment. But Bala Kitzin, that's a very shvach hechsher. The Gemara is going to discuss it. So let's have a quick look at Rashi. Tani alpha pishay matech v'choshim biyadai. Even the Yisrael dor bois chotzer. If a yid lives in that chotzer, it's just like Yishem Yotze v'nichlas Tomei, that the Mishnah is mutter, even if the wine is not under lock and key. Okay, so Zok to Gemara weiter. The Chachamim Aser Ad Shei Shomer Yoshev Mishamer Oy Ad Sheyove Mamuna Balakit. The Chachamim are being mach. In which case that we just quoted from Reb Meir are the Chachamim being machmer? So let's see. Ilema Aseifa. If it's going on the Seifa, which means that if it's the Chotzer Cheres, if there's no Yid in that Chotzer, the Tanakama, meaning Rav Meir, holds it's also no matter what. Afapi shemaftech v'chosim biyadoi. So how could the Chacham be machmer over that? Tanakama nami meiser ka'aser. He's not disagreeing with Rav Meir, so that's not a plukta. So that's not the case that it's referring to. The ella aresha de seifa must be going on the resha de seifa, which means if there's a Yisrael dar bois chatzer, Rav Meir says, according to Rabbi Yochanan, that it's mutter even without maftech v'chosim. And on that, the Chachamim are machmer. But frankly, Gemara, it doesn't make sense, because Rabbi Yochanan held that it is Yisrael dor bois chotzer, that such a great shmira, it doesn't even need a maftech v'chosim. So it's not likely that, according to Rabbi Yochanan, the Chachamim would ask for in such a case, because Rabbi Yochanan holds that such a good shmira, the fact that there's a Yisrael Dor Ba'is Chater is such a good shmira. How could Rabbi Yochanan say that the Chachamim would be machmer in such a case? So you know what case it must be referring to? The Seifa of the Resha. The Tanakama, the Chater Acheres Mutter, if it's the Yid's wine, what does it say? The Chater Acheres Mutter, V'hu Shemaftech V'choisem B'yadai. If a Yid is Dor B'Chatzah Cheretz, but it's the Yid's wine, there it would be mutter if it's under lock and key. And on there, the Chachamim said it won't be enough. The Chachamim la'olam aser achi shemer yoyshev u'mushamer oy achi yavay memuna habalakit. So that's where the Chachamim are arguing. If it's the Yid's wine and there's no Yid living in that Chatzah, while the Tanakama holds if it's under lock and key, it will be fine. But the Chachamim hold it must be. Where Rav Meir held under lock and key would be fine. Rav Meir the Chachamim holds that you need a mashgiach over there. So frankly, Gemara, memuna ba lekitzin griyusavli. If we have a mashgiach that only pops in from time to time, and we know those designated times that he comes, that's not a good mashgiach, because the guy knows when he can tamper and when he doesn't have to, when he shouldn't tamper. Ella achiyavi memuna she'ene ba lekitzin. We're changing the Lashon HaMishnah. It doesn't mean unless you have a Mashiach that comes at designated times. It's punificated. It's a Mashiach that comes not at designated times. There'll be the fear of the Yotze v'nichnas, and in such a case, you don't have to worry that the goy will answer the one. Now we need to get to this, to the Reb Shimon ben Elazar, who made a comment that was very difficult to understand. Reb Shimon ben Elazar, now what does he mean? So let's clear what Reb Shimon ben Elazar means to do. Is Reb Shimon ben Elazar lahakel or lahachmer? Is he being makel or is he being machmer? So what does it mean, being makel or being machmer? Zokt Rashi, lahakel or lahachmer. Lahakel would mean the Amr Tanakama. The Tanakama said, "Be'ir shekula oivdei kechavim." If it's the city that's full of goy, aser lanichoi beveis oivdei kechavim. You're not allowed to leave the wine of the goy in the house of the goy. Shehu bailov, because he owns it. V'hu adin beveis oivdei kechavim acher, and hu adin you can't leave it at any other goy's house. So you have the wine of a goy. The Yid manufactured wine for the goy in the goy's premises, and there was the wine of the goy. Now we know you're not supposed to leave it in the house of the goy itself. But what if they warehouse it by a third party? So it's not by Yid, but it's not by the owner of the goy, it's by a third party. So the Tanakama held it would be osir to even put it by a third party guy. Who did beweis oivd gechav macher? We come Reb Shimon ben Lozer beloshen bitmia. Vechi kol rishus oivd gechav machasi bitmia. Well, you think every rishus of a guy is the same? There should be a distinction between the owner of the wine, where we need to be afraid he'll answer it, versus a third party shomer, a third party warehouser that wouldn't dare be seen getting next to that wine. Since the wine is not in the owner's rishus, mutter, it should be mutter if it's warehoused by a third party guy. The high oivit gechavim mirsis, the oivit gechavim who's watching the warehouser is afraid to be tampering with the wine. So there's a tzad to say that there should be a distinction, and that was Rav Shimon Lozer's comment. You're answering no matter which guy it's by. I argue, I think only if it's by the original guy who owns the wine, that's where it's a problem. But if it's warehoused by a third party guy, it wouldn't be a problem. That's one way to understand Rav Shimon ben Lozer. Or maybe he's being machmer uvenichusa itmar, and he's not saying bitmia are all goyim the same. He's saying a statement: all goyim are the same, and therefore the Tanakama held punfikert. The Tanakama dafka bebeis bailav kamar. The Tanakama, when he said that the wine will be osir, that's dafka if it's kept in the warehouse of the goy, the owner. The osir of Shimon Lozer l'meimar hu adin bebeis oived chavim achar techashinin l'goyim. And Shimon Lozer says it doesn't make a difference which goy it's at, even if the wine is warehoused by a third party goy. We are concerned that the third party guy will tamper with it because he'll cover for the owner guy. So we might not be afraid that the warehousing guy will be matamit, but we're afraid the warehousing guy will allow the original guy to come and be matamit. And they cover for each other. L'goyim means they cover for each other. Avagav the high oivit gechavim shehabayis shaloi yichad loy keren zovis liyisrael. Even though the warehouser made a special garage door special for the Yid's wine, and he won't touch it. The nitvas alav, because he'll be chapped, he'll be embarrassed to be caught near that wine. But we're afraid that the warehouser will give the owner of the wine access to this wine. And that owner is the we said the owner itself is not afraid to be menasech. And therefore, we have a concern. So let's see the Gemara inside. Break the Gemara. Reb Shimon ben Lozer is coming lahachmer or lahakel. So zok the Gemara. Reb Yehuda Omer Zeiri lahakel. Reb Yehuda said the name of Zeiri that he's been makel. Reb Nachman Omer Zeiri lahachmer. So we have the same machlokes now. The question is, which is the opinion of the Chachamim and which is the opinion of Reb Shimon ben Lozer? Reb Yehuda Omer Zeiri lahakel v'achikamer. Tanakama. The Tanakama said, "Kishem shebishusay aser." Just like if the wine is kept in the rishus of the goy, it's aser. Kach rishus oivit gechavim acher nami aser. So if the wine is warehoused by a third party goy, it would be aser. We're afraid that they'll cover for each other and allow each other access to the wine. That's only if it's in the rishus of the goy. We're afraid they'll touch it. But if it was third party warehouse mutter, and we're not concerned that they'll cover for each other. The opposite. Would be mutter. Rav Shimon ben Lozer said, "Kol rishus oivdei chavim achasi." They cover for each other, and it's going to be awesome. Zot Gemara vayt. Tanya kabasad Rav Nachman Amar Ziri lahachmer. We found a support that's lahachmer. Amar Rav Shimon ben Lozer. Rav Shimon ben Lozer said, "Kol rishus oivdei chavim achasi." So we had a brisa that said that Rav Shimon ben Lozer saying it b'nichusa because he said Kol rishus oivdei chavim achasi mipnei haramoyin, because of haramoyin. So clearly, Rav Shimon ben Lozer is saying that you are choshed l'goyimlin, meaning even if it was warehoused at a third party, it would still be usher. Vice the Chachamim hold that being housed at a third party would not be usher. The very Parzik Rafila. Now, Parzik Rafila, Parzik is that actually the name of the person, and Rafila is the position. So Parzik, who was the second in command in this kingdom, Oisivu Chamra Gabe Arusayim. He placed wine. He had this arrangement where there was kosher wine by him, and he third party warehoused it by his oris, by his sharecropper. So this is not a third-party warehouse company. This is his sharecropper. He said, I want you to store the wine for me. So Sober Rabbanon Kamei de Rav Lamemar, maybe here it's like a third-party warehouse. When do you need to be worried about them covering for each other? That's if I warehouse your wine and you warehouse my wine. And therefore, I'll give you access to the wine in my storage facility, and you'll pay me back by giving me access to the wine in your storage facility. But Pilot Rafila, he was only warehousing it by the Oris. There's no way the Oris is going to warehouse his stuff by Pilot Rafila. So therefore, Aval Hacha, Kivin Arisai, Lav Dakir Suve Pajak Refila. There's no way that the Aris is going to be asking Pajak Refila to warehouse for him. So therefore, maybe we don't have to be concerned that the Aris will cover for Pajak and not tell the Jew if the guy accessed it. Even though in the normal case, you're not worried about one warehousing guy covering for the other guy, that's because they're two people, independent people doing business with each other, and therefore maybe one will have integrity and the other will have integrity. And that's why you're not Kosher L'Goyim. You can be sure that the Aris is terrified of Pazak Rafila and would never stab him in the back. So therefore, even if normally you're not Kosher L'Goyim, mach be'alayu. It'll be much worse. Mach be'alayu. He's for sure going to cover for him. So therefore, even though Pazak Rafila warehoused the wine by his Aris, there would definitely be a concern without a Mishkiach Tamidi, the wine would be awesome. Hukacha. There was a city, Yosy Bechamer de Yisrael, had exactly this case. It was a Goyish city, but there was Jewish wine that was there, and there's a Shaila how to learn this Gemara, if it's a Jewish wine, it belonged to a Yid, if it was third-party warehouse, or if it was a Goyish wine and the Yid made it kosher. But Ishtakach Ovid Kachavim have a Koi Beini Dadi. They caught a Goy that was in between the barrels there. Amarava, how do we know if we could be matter? Im Nitvis Olav Kaganev, if he's caught, Rashi says, and he would be afraid that if he was caught, he would be punished and prosecuted. As Rashi says, he's a weak Ovid Gechavim, and he fears prosecution. Then the Chamer is Shari Bishtia. It'll even be Asher Bishtia Zakrava because there's no way he would touch it. But Viloi, if there's not that fear, then it's going to be Asher Afilu Banoah because he for sure touched it. Now, before we finish the parak, Rashi says, you just learned a whole bunch of complicated halachas. Let me make a little digest for you so it would be easier to review and understand what we learned in the last couple of days. So let's see this beautiful Rashi. If a guy touches wine, since he knew he was touching wine and he wanted to touch wine, therefore, if he merely agitated the wine, even if he didn't pour the wine, it's Asher Bana. Where did we learn that, Rashi? Mimasnisin da'agardimim oivdei mishum lech amar nazira. We had a Mishnah that said that the Gardimim are the people who are in charge of weights and measures. If they stick a straw into a barrel, they're measuring, they're doing, it answers the barrel. It's a special chumrah, even though they're not there for it, but they might touch it. So that's the first halacha that we learned. Now, shaloi b'kavana. What if a guy touched wine without kavana? For instance, the guy thought he was touching oil. He didn't realize he was touching wine. There we say, remember the Cherem was the wild guy who would like to make trouble, and he stuck his hand into a Yid's wine, but he thought he was sticking his hand into oil. There we were matir because the guy didn't even know he was sticking his hand into wine. We had the Mishnah with a guy who fell into a bar. Remember, we said that's only if he died there, not if he climbed out. Again, it's mutter ba'ana mimasnisin from the Mishnah that we learned. Going esrik, the Rabashi, the story of Rabashi where an esrik fell into someone's wine and the guy quickly stuck his hand in to grab it. The fact that the guy stuck his hand in does not make yayin esech, because that's shaloi b'kavanahu umutter ba'ana. That wine is also mutter ba'ana. What about Marga Ovid Kechavim al Yidei Davar Acher? What if a guy didn't directly touch it, but he touched it with a stick? There only there we know that if he was if he was mechaber for something else, not for Avodah Zara, for instance, kimadadu bikana a hidus is a tzira. If he was measuring how deep the wine was, or if he was just chasing away a bug, that will be mutter bano because he touched it not with the kavanah to be menasech, but clearly he had a mission to accomplish. We must listen. And the kavanah but if a guy purposely touched the wine, knowing he touched the wine, and we don't know that he had a specific purpose to do that other than possibly Avodah Zara, then Asher Ba'na, Mehu Uvdo de Beiram, like the story of Beiram, the Shayurav, Mishum the Shaloi B'Kavanah, in the Sugi of Beiram, where it was Shaloi B'Kavanah, Rav was Matir, and we could be Medayik from there, Haba Kavanah Asher, if the guy touched it, knowing that he's touching it without other specific purpose, then it wouldn't be Nasr. We also learned about koichai shalav tikachavim. If it's the koich of the guy, he poured. So his koich is causing the wine to be poured, but he's not directly touching the wine. Bechiburin, going to uruk like he's pouring in. So that was the case where the Talmid Chacham asked the guy to pour for them, not knowing he was a guy. Hikaboy shu yain. We said if the guy knows that what he's pouring is wine, asher bana, it'll be asher bana. Rabbi Yochanan the Amar from Rabbi Yochanan who said. Say v'hachreis al yena mishum yain nesach mishum leich leich. Rabbi Yochanan said, even though it's not mamish yain nesach, but we're extra machmer, and in the city where this was done, he said, announced that this wine should be asher bana. Lo hikkerboy. What if the guy didn't even know that it was wine that he was touching? Then it's muter af b'shtia. How do we know that? Mahu uvda Rabbi Yochanan ben Arzev, Rabbi Yosy ben Hiroi, the chad shari afilu b'shtia mishum da'ovid kechavim lo havayoda. Right on the tzad that was mutter, Rabbi Shua ben Levi says, I even understand that tzad matir, even l'shashia, because the guy thought it was beer. What if there's never a direct touch between the guy and the wine? For instance, a guy throws a barrel into wine. There it's mutter af b'shtia. Even if you had kavanah to make yain nesach, throwing something into a barrel or any other object into a Jew's wine without a direct touching, that's mutter midir Rashi, like we learned from Rashi. Davar kosher b'zav, which is the last more we learned yesterday. Kosher b'zav tar, meaning if I'm touching the stick that's touching the wine, that would be a problem. That would make a tummy for a zov and also for a goy. But throwing something, if a zov threw something at somebody, it wouldn't make that person tummy. It wouldn't make anything tummy. A and B is therefore, if a goy threw something into wine, it would not make it yain nesach. Baruch Hashem, we were zeicha to finish Perek B'Shmuel, but the neder hadn lach B'Shmuel, but the neder hadn lach B'Shmuel, the neder hadn lach B'Shmuel.
Yeah.
I heard yesterday something that's very scary, and I don't know if the Olam heard Palaveris